Hi, we are live. Welcome to A Brief History of Mystery, guys. This is my good friend Stormy Bear from Sciworx and Spencer from Aliens and Stuff. And today we are going to be talking about Bob Lazar. Because in previous videos that I've done on my channel, I've said I firmly believe in Bob Lazar. But there are people out there, debunkers, that say I'm a fool, say I'm an idiot. I've read quite a lot of their statements today, and they really do say that quite a lot. That says you're an idiot if you believe Bob Lazar. So what is the truth? We're going to get stuck in today. But first of all, welcome. Stormy, why don't you say hello to the lovely people?
Hello, lovely people. It's such a great thing to be, great thing to be here. I just want to make sure everybody knows Storm Bear is my real name. It's not some made up thing, and I'm not trying to hide my identity. Storm Bear.
And he's an American. So
and I'm American. God help me.
I hadn't noticed. But no, I'm really grateful to have you on the show. And Spence, you've been on one of my videos before, but you've lost the beard, so people might not recognize you. So
yeah, I do try and step it up and have a different haircut or facial hair every time I make any sort of public appearance. So yeah, I've knocked it on the head today.
That is the way to do it. So if you would like to join and subscribe to these wonderful channels, the link is in the description of the video. So first of all, talking about Bob Lazar, this is one of the things that I wanted to sort of get off my chest a little bit. And it's busting the myth that he's never profited. Hold your breath, I'm going to rant a little bit. Right. So one of the things they always say is he doesn't profit, he doesn't make any money from this. It's just a problem for his life. Bullshit, he does. He wrote a book, for God's sake, which actually did quite well. He's appeared in at least 2 documentaries that I can think off the top of my head. He does go out and do interviews and talks, and he does go to conventions, and he does get paid for these things. So I think what we should say, if we're going to say that he doesn't profit, is always say he doesn't profit as much as he could. He could profit a lot more from his story. He could go to every convention, so and so on, but he doesn't. So that is just one of those little things that kind of annoys me, and I just wanted to get it off my chest. Okay, what do you guys think? Did you think that the money that he does or doesn't make is an issue in the story?
Well, I mean, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, he did certainly profit from it. I mean, IMDb has him appearing in 21 different productions. I know the Lazar tape, and I think the proper title was the Lazar tape and excerpts from the government Bible. I think that he was a producer on that, and that was in 1992 or 3.
There you go.
And he was in sightings and his UFO diaries, and he was in, all sorts of things. And yeah, the Lazar tape was 1991. Excuse me. But yeah, in the book, and he's got other things coming. And even if the only thing he's profiting from was his business that he, United Nuclear. Then that's still free advertising for his business. So at the very root,
very good point. Yeah,
you have to say, well, he's still business because it's PR for his.
Yeah,
he's making money.
Didn't he at least was involved in releasing a toy of the sports model as well, the UFO that he said he saw? There was a model kit or something, and I'm sure he was involved in that as well. But anyway,
yeah, Tester's the sports model.
Yeah. What do you think, Tesla?
Yeah,
Spence, is it even relevant though? Does it matter?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? Where, I mean, even looking at United Nuclear, they sell UFO T-shirts and paraphernalia, so they're piggybacking off of that story already, even not from a PR perspective. Yep. There we go. I did hear some rumors, and I couldn't find any sort of substantiated evidence for it, but rumors about him, sort of during the mid to late 90s, actually going out and optioning his life story for potential sort of cinema, making a movie out of it. Like I said, I couldn't find any substantial evidence of that, but I've heard a couple of people mentioning it online. So, yeah, it is that toss-up, isn't it? Of does it matter if he's profiting? Well, I think because so many people make the argument, oh, well, it must be legit because he's not making any money. I think that does make it relevant. Yeah.
I think that's my point. That's why it irritates me so much, to be honest, because it keeps being thrown. It's like he's so honourable. He's something that he's doing this for the truth, and I'm like, oh, well, no, he has made a bit of money on this. So let's be real. That's what I want to say. Let's be realistic about this. another thing that said a lot about them, that he's never profited, also that this has ruined his life in lots of ways. I just mentioned to you guys before the video started about some of the things I've seen on Twitter in the last few years when researching Bob Lazar.
Yeah.
One of them was this idiot that basically went to where Bob lives and got in his face. We're going to talk about the brothel incident a bit later, aren't we? But he got in Bob's face, and he basically said that one of the girls that worked at the brothel that he was involved in was underage, and basically was saying to him, "You like underage girls, then, do you?" And just really went at him like this. And Bob was obviously really upset by this attack, completely unfounded, you know, completely out of sideways, you know, he was just walking down the street. This guy was not subtly implying that Bob was some sort of paedophile or sex offender or something else. That was never what the story was with the brothel and everything. There was never any accusations of that. But this guy thought he would get a video and get 50,000 hits on his silly little channel. That's not debunking. That's cruelty.
Something similar happened to Buzz Aldrin some years ago. One of the moon hoaxers caught him on the street and had a Bible. Said, "I want you to swear on this Bible that you walked on the moon." I mean, just out of nowhere. So Buzz Aldrin punched him.
Punched him square in the face.
Square in the face.
Was it 85 when he did it as well?
It's you can find it on YouTube, and it's just like glorious. And I read an article later, you know, because the guy filed charges. Aldrin had to appear in court, and the judge snarked off on the journalist. He just said, "Well, you know, maybe you shouldn't go up to people to tag them." That
walked on the moon and give them
Navy guys punched him right in the head.
God, I love him. I just love it. I can't help but watch anything with Buzz Aldrin and whatever you believe about the moon landings. He's just a genius, and he's just such a character. But moving away from that anyway, because I don't want to get personal.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Just for the vitriol that people feel over. I mean, I'm very much. I suppose I'm Bob Lazar ambivalent. Sometimes I believe him, sometimes I don't. You know, I'm like a pendulum. I keep swinging either way. But yeah, I mean, even, you know, we're only a relatively small channel, but even some of the comments we got when we posted our video online, even just questioning his story, right? Abuse, and then from the other side of the camp as well, abuse, and people just don't seem able to have a reasonable discourse about it, which is unfortunate.
Say something negative about Stephen Greer and see what happens.
Woo! Wow.
We're not saying anything negative about Stephen Greer today.
I'm never saying anything negative about him again. I did a video that just suggested it. Anyway, so element 115, that's sort of a biggie. And there's a few bits that I want to sort of get my teeth stuck into on this. Stormy, that's why we sort of started this conversation, because you recently did a video about 115.
And the haters came out.
Well, exactly, yeah. And it's the big thing that the debunkers go for. Anybody want to explain why do the debunkers use it as a reason why this is all nonsense?
I think it's just one thing on the menu to debunk Bob Lazar for. I mean, it's just like, you know, they have this running thing. Oh, well, this is, you know, somebody says something about Bob Lazar, they look it up on the list. Oh, 0.7 is I got to go down this path. And, you know, the things that they debunk about, and this is something you and I discussed earlier, is this like, I wish they would do more work. I mean, if you want to debunk something, okay, fine, that's great, but at least try to use the scientific method, or at least a 7th grade version of it. You know, and it's just like some of these things are so farcical. Like there's this one site that only thing it's devoted. It's just only thing it does is try to debunk Bob Lazar. And this is my main point. You know, they're talking about,
the way to spend your day, though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it is. It is. And you know, you look at these sites, and this is one example. They say, and they declare unequivocally that Bob Lazar got the idea for the sports model from Meyer, you know, the Meyer photographs. And well, what's the evidence for that? Why couldn't he have? gotten the idea from the day the Earth stood still, or the Roswell Daily Record. You know, for the Roswell. I mean, they describe. You know, I even brought examples. They even describe the farmer did. The shape of it was two bowls, mouth to mouth. So, I mean, that's kind of a sports model look, kind of, right?
Yeah.
So, what is the definitive evidence that Bob Lazar got it from Meyer? They don't mention it. They just right over it to something else. And that's the thing that bugs me is, okay, you're saying it's this. Well, prove it's this. You know, and along for, you know, and for why that trigger and why 115 triggers people. You know, I think they associate a lot of things to Bob that Bob never said.
Yeah,
a lot.
But I think I think that it's triggered and started, though, isn't it? Because as soon as 115 was created,
right,
the Bob believers went, it's been proved right again. Look, it's been proved right again. And even physicists did say that if we could stabilize this 115, we don't really know what it would be like, but they've said it would be insanely dense. So the believers again went, well, Bob was right. Bob was right. The debunkers, though, will say, well, we've only created it. It's got no use. We've got no use that we can think of it. We've only ever created it in like microns. It's got a decay life of nothing. So then it's debunked. It's not true, then, is it?
Well, I think
yes,
once again, I mean, I think it's for difficulty. I'm no scientist, so I mean, I get details wrong all the time. But it's like I was saying about this sort of oppositional two sides is once again, you've got a lot of non-scientists on both sides dishing out facts when a lot of the time they don't really know what they're talking about. Now, I mean, the only point for me, I suppose, was when they did synthesize, was it Moscovium, isn't it? Element 150. Yeah. When they did first synthesize it, as you said, everyone was going, oh, Bob was right. Bob was right. But as a hypothetical, element 115 was mentioned even in the same month that Bob had the first interview on TV where his face was blacked out. I think it was 1989. Scientific American released an article about element 115 saying all of the same stuff that Bob was saying. So it's not like this information is, you know, Bob was the first person to present this and bring this out. It's theoretical information that's been around for a very, very, very long time. That's not to say that disproves Bob, but I think people need to be more aware of that fact, you know, before treating it like it's, you know, the word of Bob, you know, word of God. But yeah, right. That's just my 2 cents.
In Bob we trust.
Right, and Bob would trust. I mean, many times Bob has said, you know, the thing that he did primarily at S4 was he figured out what he theorized. He gave a window of 114 to 116. Somewhere in there is probably where this element lies, you know. And he said the only thing I did there was I discovered that's what was used in this part. He didn't discover the element; he discovered its use in the craft. And he says this over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. I think the point the debunker said is well, what we've got only lasts microseconds and it's useless. Like that is relevant. And I say, well, Bob, the other thing the debunkers were saying that I've been reading a lot of debunkers today. God, they're miserable sods. But that Bob once said that 115 can't be manufactured. It can only be produced in places where there is high dense gravity. So certain star systems like Zeta Reticuli, places like this, that might have very, very dense stars that you might be able to produce this material. Even if Bob did say that at the time, he would have been talking about something 30 years ago that he didn't really maybe 100% understand. And he was sort of like trying to theorize. Producing this material or producing this element back then would be fantasy. So I mean, there's lots of other things we're going to talk about today about how things he said aren't necessarily untrue because it was what he understood or how he was able to sort of frame it then.
Science and I think in the last 30 years. I'm sorry, Spencer.
Yeah. No problem. I think, you know, looking at it from that angle as well, is it's a case of, and I might have this wrong, but yeah, there's a lot of people out there that I've spoken to, you know, some people who work in the field saying, you know, element 115 is useless. There is no use for it. Obviously, it's got, you know, less than a second, and then it decays into 113. But from what I remember, Bob was saying that what they did was they had to bombard 115 with protons to turn it into 116, and then that has the byproduct of producing gravitons. So although 115 on its own, you know, with our current scientific understanding, might have no use, there's obviously some sort of technical process behind that was being discussed. And once again, it's another bit of info people don't really discuss, but I think is really really relevant to the conversation.
Well, you know, Bob has there's this one thing, and we're talking about his prophet here, was he did this, you know, one tape, the Lazar tape, and he describes, you know, it's almost like a master's class. Everyone bitches about, well, where's all this data? Why doesn't he talk about the physics? Well, he's done that, you know, in this master's class kind of thing, this tape. And he discusses that, you know, once, you know, the proton hits the element 116, it immediately turns from 115, then immediately turns to 116 and immediately decays, but that energy then becomes antimatter, not gravitons. He hates gravitons. In fact, I made notes on how much Bob Lazar hates the idea of gravitons. He thinks it is cheating. You know, and he's, you know, he goes in 1993 at this UFO fest in Rachel, Nevada. He had this long, it was like a 2-hour lecture Q&A session, and he talked at length about his problems with a lot of current theories in 1993. And gravitons was one of the things that he just did not like. But anyway, I don't mean to debunk you, Spencer. I love you, man.
No, it's cool. It's like I said, I'm not a scientist, so correct me all day long.
That's all.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things, actually, another thing that when Bob was right, was that he said gravity was a wave. You could argue, though, he had a 50-50 chance on that one. Is there a possibility he's actually just a really lucky liar?
Well, you know, I tell you, he could be a really lucky liar, you know. And if you go back in time, you know, there's a lot of things he lucked out on, like made another notes. He was talking about, you know, intermediate vector bosons. You know, it's not often you can just ask somebody a question off the top of your head. You know, well, Bob, what do you feel? How do you feel about intermediate vector bosons? You know, and then he replies, well, that's just BS. You know, maybe the Zeta particles are real, but I'm not sure about the rest of them. You know, and people that smart, they're always working in government anyway. Oh, wait, Bob did. Yeah. But so if he's lucky, holy crap, is he lucky?
Yep.
And I think he's always talking from a position of education, which I know is on the list of things to discuss. Because I mean, seriously, he just off the cuff, somebody will ask him about something like that, and he will have a scientifically informed opinion about it. I mean, he just, you know, he's not like some of these guys that claim this such and such UFO facts, and they're just factually wrong. You know, he's always, at least if you look at the time frame that he's made these statements, I mean, he's right up there with the modern science, you know. And I mean, gravitons, I mean, he's always been right about gravitons. And gravitons he thinks is just a BS. And, you know, academia still kind of is out to lunch on gravitons. And recent work at CERN kind of backs Bob up.
It's only really in the last 3 years that the whole graviton thing has been completely put to bed now. It's not. Yeah. I think gravity acts as a wave. We've proved it. We've seen it. We've done it. And again, just one more time, when gravity is one of those things, I think that scientists struggle to explain it because it's such an uncertain thing. It's a bit like dark matter for me. Dark matter is proven. We know it is. But you actually ask a physicist to say, okay, well, what is it? That's when it tends to get a little bit fuzzy. Dark energy. We know it exists. Okay, well, what is it? It starts getting a bit fuzzy and a bit more difficult to sort of explain. But So the one thing with 115 then is again saying about he's a lucky liar. He has got a scientific background. So could he have just gone, right, we've got elements 111 and 112. I'll skip a couple. I'll say it's 115. Could it just be that he's just picked a number on the periodic table that wasn't taken? And I'm being devil's advocate.
He could have. I mean, when I was in school back in the previous century, 1970s, when I first took chemistry, I mean, 115 was in there, but it was just a blank box. They had all 15, 16, 17, 18, and it was just blank boxes. Talking about, it being mentioned that same month that Bob mentioned it in Scientific American, I mean, scientists have been talking about it for 100 years. Theorizing heavier elements, and I know when we entered the nuclear age and in Project Manhattan, everybody, well, what's a more energetic element than plutonium, and can we weaponize it? These heavier elements have always been of interest to at least the military sector because of their high level of energetics.
Mm-hmm. All right, shall we move on to his education, because this is the difficult one. So, even I know, I'd say I've a video. I named it, I Believe Bob. Right, that was the name of the video. But and the link to that video is in the description. You can go look at it. The education is a problem.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he says he has postgraduate degrees from MIT and Caltech.
Caltech.
In electrical engineering and physics or something physics.
It is an MS in electronics and from Caltech, and a master's in MIT in physics. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. So some debunkers have said he can't have done those courses at the time. They weren't available. Other people have said that's not true. Of course, he could have done. Witnesses have come forward since and saying they used to take him to MIT, I think it was. I don't know if anyone's come forward about Caltech, but taking him to the library and things like this. But there are no records of him going to that university. There are no records of him ever attending any classes. Teachers have said that they don't remember him. How big a problem is that? Particularly, Stormy, you'll probably know how American colleges work a little bit better than we do, but I know what universities are like here.
Right.
It would surprise me at all if a tutor didn't know somebody that walked into their class. But how big a problem is this education and the lack of education? Apparently.
Well, let me just talk about mine for a bit and to give you a background on how the American education system works. Mm-hmm. I've got 4 college degrees. The first 3 were from a community college. It's a 2-year degree. I got one in electronics. I got one in software, and I got one that's a college transfer. So people trying to get their college education on the cheap, they get the 2-year degree at the local college, and then they go to a 4-year university. And so, but after I got the 2-year degrees, then I just hop, skipped, and jumped through multiple colleges: High Point University, UNCG, University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and a few others, and Wake Forest University. And then I finally got all my credits together and then jumped to Thomas Edison University in New Jersey and finished up my 4-year degree. Now, if you look at my record, I don't appear in the yearbooks of UNCG or Wake Forest University or High Point University because I was a part-time student. If you're a part-time student, you're never going to be in the paper. You're never going to go to the beer blast because you've got a job or kids or something else you have, some other part of your life you've got to manage. And it's like you never attended. And one of the beef I have with Wake Forest University is when I was getting all my credits together for Thomas Edison to transfer, I was missing one. I was missing international economics, Econ 230 or something like that. And so I had the receipt. I had some test papers. I had my grades as printed out. And this is really before computers kicked in. And I went all the way up to the university president. I'm sorry, Mr. Williams. You just we don't have a record of you so we can't give you your credit. So here is just they lost it, and I can't get that credit back. So please don't feel that the American education system is stellar. It's broken just like every other damn thing in this country. So, I mean, don't
In the
give the
West.
American system too much credit for being competent.
And that's what I mean. So I remember thinking about this, and I said to my mate, he says he couldn't remember any of his tutors' names, and I've got a degree, and so I sat down and thought, right, how many of my tutors' names can I remember? None, not one. I couldn't remember. I remember one was called Susan, because a film came out at the time. It was Aliens versus Monsters. Remember that, like a Pixar movie or a DreamWorks film?
Yeah.
And there's the one bit where Susan. Oh, I scared myself. And so she was called Susan, so I kept going Susan from the back of the class. That's the only reason I remember her name. I don't know what her second name was. Somebody asked me what year did I get my degree. I couldn't remember. I had to go through and try to figure out how old my child was, because I kind of remember she was little when I got it. So I don't have a major problem with him not being able to remember things for verbatim or getting names wrong.
I mean, I can definitely see your perspective there. I mean, if somebody, well, if people ask me, where were you, what year were you working there? What year did you get your degree? What year did you live here? I can't pick those dates out of my head. I have to go back to LinkedIn. I've got a little notebook I go back through. I did find it a bit odd that he couldn't remember lecturers or tutors, but then I do, but obviously you don't. So not everybody remembers the same details. The thing I find most odd about it is the logistics, frankly. Where Bob says he was meant to be and where he actually was often don't marry up very, very well. So looking at, for example, MIT, so the Los Alamos jet car story was in June 1982. And in the article, it said that Lazars had just moved to Los Alamos from California a month before, and insinuated that they'd been in California for some time prior to that. But that was the same year that Bob claimed that he got his master's from MIT, which is about 3,000 miles away. So it doesn't quite marry up when you actually look at the logistics of that. I know that obviously Stanton Friedman, not Bob's biggest fan, but also George Knapp tried to do some investigative journalism into finding some evidence of Lazar at MIT and pulled up nothing. Glenn Campbell went through the student directories from 1978 all the way up to 1990. No Lazar in there. And then obviously with Caltech, he was meant to be getting his master's at Caltech in 1985. But when he applied for bankruptcy in 86 and gave his past addresses, nowhere in California. And obviously that's 1,000 miles away from where he was supposed to be at the point. So how did he spend a year studying in California with no address when he was meant to be living 1,000 miles across the states? It just, the details just don't marry up. And I know part of that could be due to Bob not remembering the year right or getting a bit confused, but we're not just talking about 1 year, we're talking about the surrounding years around that, and it's okay. Well, if you think you went in 1982, there's probably a 5-year window maybe, but for the 5 years you were on the other side of the country. So there's just some sketchy details and missing details.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to add is, I don't know how the Brit system does it, but there's a thing here in the United States called out-of-state tuition. For instance, if you lived in Nevada and you went to Caltech in California, then your address will be Nevada, because they are going to charge you a higher rate. And you probably, unless you got scholarships or something, they will charge you a higher rate per tuition credit because you live in another state. So, if you go to register at an out-of-state school, then whatever your home address is still your residency. Because now because they also want you, they don't want you to vote in the college town you live in. They want you to vote in the state you're from. And so, let's say his address was in Nevada all that time. It doesn't mean dick. It doesn't mean anything, because it was.
We're allowed to say dick.
You can say that. That's fine.
It doesn't mean dick. Because of how Americans treat out-of-state tuition and out-of-state students.
Yeah, I want to come back to education in a second, but this Zeta Reticuli has come up a couple of times in the comments. Thanks, David, and Amy's just mentioned it as well. And I just wanted to just very quickly, but we'll come back to it. my understanding is the Zeta Reticuli story comes from. Hey, Mike's just said hello, Spence. There you go.
Hi, Mike. Yeah,
Zeta
Betty Barney Hill.
Yeah, it does come from Betty Barney Hill. It was related to Betty Barney Hill, and that's fine. But actually, he says the Zeta Reticuli stuff comes from those packs that he was given when he first started working at S4. So he was given a pack full of loads of information, and it said that the UFO comes from Zeta Reticuli. So he's only really, in his words, repeating what he's been told by somebody else. And he even says he's not sure if it's true. He doesn't know if it's true or not.
Yeah.
He actually genuinely believes certain bits of that information that's in that pack probably weren't true purposefully, to sort of then, if stuff does get leaked and talked about somewhere, that they look for the lie. And if they tell everybody a different lie,
it's compartmentalization, isn't it?
In a way of tracking down if somebody does whistleblow. It's quite a common little tactic, I think. So I appreciate where it's coming from. And Dave, I totally agree with you. The Zeta Reticuli stuff related to Betty and Barney Hill, we did a video on that a couple of weeks ago, and we basically concluded that was probably a lot of fantasy going on. But because that is related to Bob, is not really here nor there. He's not said they come from Zeta Reticuli. He has said that's what they told me. So that's just my
even.
Go ahead.
Sorry. There you go. You go.
Okay, so in the Lazar tape and excerpts from the government Bible, he says, I'm dividing this into two parts. Part one consists of, and he goes down, this is everything that I actually saw, touched, felt, or heard, in terms of working in S4. And then he says part two is things that just what they told me. I have no personal hands-on experience. I don't know. I'm just relating what I was told to you. And that collection of paperwork, I mean, that's what he calls the government Bible. And he goes to extreme lengths. Okay, I saw this, but I was told this. So and he always said, take what they told me as a grain of salt. But I can say that I saw this, I saw this, I saw this personally. The things sheets of paper they hand me with a story on it, or a briefing or an intelligence briefing, I got no way to say if that's yay or nay.
I think Dave makes a good point there, though, that it felt like it was something he'd injected. It did, and it is a good point. Zeta Reticuli may have just come from the fact that he knew from the Betty and Barney Hill story. He'd heard that, so he threw it in because he knew ufologists would go crazy for it.
Yeah, I think as well. Yeah, you've sort of got to look at as well is that Bob's not the only one talking about Zeta Reticuli. I mean, even very anti-Bob ufologists talk about Zeta Reticuli, and it's a flipping big place. It's a massive swath of the galaxy. Well, it's of the universe. So what's to say that the star map from Betty and Barney Hill might have been wrong, but that doesn't mean that there couldn't be something from there. So I don't know if that really. I don't really see it as a debunking, in my opinion. It's just cross referencing, isn't it?
Yeah, and they could have used I'm blanking on the guy's name, Doty, D-O-T-Y, the debunker, the military debunker, his job. Have you heard of this guy? I mean, so there was a debunking mechanism in place for UFO. So maybe the debunkers, the Doties of the world let's take this thing, the Zeta Reticuli idea from Betty and Barney, and insert it into our documentation and feed it to Lazar.
Yeah.
And just see if we can to help us trace back a leak.
I often think that I always wonder why they gave him a job, and we know he worked at Area 51 at some point. He worked at Los Alamos. We definitely know. And thanks, Mike. I'm tapping the wrong thing. United. And I always wonder, why did they give him a job? If his story's true, why did they give him a job playing with the biggest secret in the world? Because they must have known he was a bit of a character. And I sometimes wonder if that's probably why they did, because they must have given him a job thinking, let's get somebody that can think out the box. And if he tells anybody, we'll destroy him.
Well, again, you're placing way too much competency on the United States of America. Did you see who our last president was? I mean, the government hires somebody that's incompetent, or maybe a little bit of has some issues, or maybe out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's the United States of America. Of course, we're going to do that. Thoughtfulness enters the American equation. I don't think so. So to us, let's say they're struggling with a problem. The government is, and they are trying to look, and they literally legitimately are trying to look outside the box and solve the one propulsion. So they said, well, let's go find somebody that is really smart, that is also easily debunkable.
Yeah.
He knows. Yeah, let's run with that. And again, back in 89, 90, the country was overrun with charismatic TV evangelists on every channel. So, the government hires him. Well, okay.
I was thinking with regards to this, actually, it might well be a case of, because obviously Friedman checked out his high school records from New York State, and he ranked very, very lower third, which Friedman said was not good enough for MIT or Caltech. Now, regardless of that, I know a lot of people online have been saying, for example, well, maybe he is that smart, and maybe he did work at S4, but he didn't go to MIT or Caltech, and he's blagged his way in, and he's sort of sticking to that narrative. The flip to it for me ultimately is, the guy built a particle accelerator at his house. He builds jet cars. He's a smart guy. Obviously he's running United Nuclear now. I know that he had he made some connections from the areas that he was in. It may well have been a case that regardless of his education, they knew he was a smart guy. They knew that he had the technical expertise, and they went, let's get the guy on board, because he might just not be academic. He might just be a smart guy that doesn't deal well with the academic process. I don't know. It could be anything, but there's a lot of ways to get into organizations. You don't necessarily have to follow the correct channels all the time.
They thought there was something wrong with Einstein when he was younger. They thought he was from an education point of view, he was slow. And it's not that he was slow, it's just that his brain was so much further on than what he was trying to be taught at primary school, whatever the equivalent was for Einstein, that he wasn't interested. So his teachers thought he wasn't very bright. So I don't think not doing very well at elementary school or whatever it is that relevant sometimes. Sometimes genius is so far above it they're bored by 2 + 2 = 4.
And if he's building a particle accelerator in his bedroom as a kid, he's probably bored to death in school. It's just, if he can build a particle accelerator, he probably knows more about subatomic particles than his high school teacher.
So one of the miserable sod debunkers I read today tried to argue in this story that building a particle accelerator in your bedroom isn't a big deal.
Oh, come off it!
Really? I've got 3. I don't know what you're on about. I've got one in the garage. The one in the attic's acting up a little bit at the moment, and the one in the kitchen boils an egg beautifully.
Oh, I bet it does.
Yeah, it's great, but it's not normal, is it? Somebody doesn't build a particle accelerator thing. But also, well, let's talk about the jet car then, because again, that's relevant to his education. Some people he has stated a couple of times, Bob Lazar, that the jet engine is very efficient, and it's a specific type of jet engine, which I probably should have written down that I've forgotten. And other people have argued it's not an efficient type of jet engine, but irrelevant for me. He built the damn thing from scratch. He built little ones that he put on the back of a bike. This is not somebody that has no education. He is quite a talented engineer and scientist and physicist at very least, because he built these things and they didn't explode. He also had the.
That's such a good point. He didn't kill himself trying to do it.
Yeah. And I actually, when we did our video, please go back and watch the video, because at one point I told my mate Damien that he built this. That must show he has some sort of education. I couldn't build a jet engine. And he sat back and went, I probably could. I was like, no, you couldn't. It's like, you can't build a jet engine. So
yeah, you've got to look at it as well. It's not like he could bloody log on to YouTube and we'll go on resources online and find this stuff. It wasn't like that back then. Even Friedman, who he didn't hate the guy, but even Friedman said, he is a smart guy. He obviously has a scientific background. It's certain, but so. Yeah, let's be frank. None of us are building jet engines. None of us are building particle accelerators.
No.
Well, I don't know about you, Storm. Maybe you are, but
Film looks
Well,
like the
my
sort
day
of
job is an aircraft mechanic, so yes, I can build a jet.
See, now,
But
when
I
you
can't.
say it,
But I
I
can't
believe you.
fabricate the parts. I mean, I can't do all the custom work he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can
Well,
just
Mike's,
order something on from Boeing and then kind of reassemble that. That's but
mm,
still building one of those little things. That's a different.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Mike's made the point there that maybe he didn't build them, maybe he was given them basically as part of the cover story. I've never really believed he was a misinformation agent. I think if he's not telling the truth, he's maybe he's an unwilling misinformation agent. I do believe he's been told stuff that he wasn't true to make him look silly. I do believe that. He even says now that at one point he thinks he saw an alien in the hangar.
Yes. Yeah.
Now it's been a bit
The
more. I suppose
kids.
yeah, exactly, in the chair sort of thing. He's come back and said more recently, oh, maybe I didn't. I'm not sure. It might have just been like a dummy, like a crash test dummy. I'm not sure. So
Yeah,
he's been, even that he's honest about that.
Is 1993.
Yeah.
And that was just a couple years after the Knapp interview. And he said, well, I mean, it could have been a crash test dummy because it was the same size, but he said he didn't see the face. He said if it was the almond eyes, I would have just shit my pants.
Yeah. But I don't think he would be a plant. For one, I don't think he's dishonest. If he's not telling the truth, I think he believes it, bare minimum. And I don't think he's a fantasist, but it's possible. It seems to me that I don't think his story is credible enough for him to be a plant. And I think there are plants. I think there are people in the UFO community that are set up. And there are other people.
No, Jay, no.
Sorry. There are people that come out with things that you wonder. It's almost too realistic, too true. Something. I ask about Tom DeLonge, and I don't trust. I think he believes it, but I think he's a complete patsy. I think he's just being fed stuff. And the government generals are probably there going, here, Tom, tell people about this. And he just goes, oh yes, please, thank you. And it doesn't smack as true to me. I think
with Bob as well, you've got to look at the fact. I mean, I'm not striking off that he might not be an unwilling plant, but a knowing plant. And I know that it's not foolproof, but he did. He has had lie detector tests, taken by ex police officials who were and he passed. So I know there's a lot of it's coming up in the comments a lot about body language experts. But even with regards to body language, that can be thrown out by a myriad of different factors. One of them might potentially, and I'm not making a comment on it or saying this for certain, but I know there is a talk about whether Bob might have a sort of minor autistic tendencies or something, and things like that can throw out body language tests and analysis. So I don't really see that as a debunking, but the fact that the guy can pass a lie detector test, although it's not foolproof, I'm convinced that he is saying what he believes is true.
Didn't
that's my
that put him
opinion.
through 4 or 5 lie detector tests?
Yeah, loads. Yeah,
and you maybe get past one of them, but then as every successive one, the strain gets more and more and more, and so it becomes more difficult to pass them.
Well, I will say I've got a psychology background. So and worked in mental health for quite a long time. The lie detector tests, they're not science, they're an art at best. And you're talking about probabilities of honesty, really. You don't tell the truth. But also, if you've got certain conditions, like if you are on the autism scale, things like Asperger's, then a lie detector test is irrelevant. Because you don't react to the stimulus in what would they consider a normal way. The body language thing is exactly the same. You don't react to stimulus in the same way if you are autistic. I would argue that even though have never heard anything to say that he has been diagnosed, it would not surprise me at all if Bob is on the autism scale, and it is probably Asperger's. The way he speaks, the way he answers questions. Sometimes his eye contact is quite poor, particularly when he's stressed. Does scream to me, how do you, Dave? Does scream to me that he may be on the scale. And you can remember as well that the autism is a sliding scale. He's very high functioning if he is. So the polygraphs and things, they are easy to fool and they are easy to trick. But more than that, if you are actually autistic, you unintentionally are tricking the device. And everything I've seen on body language, everyone I see, for one I see that says, some expert says he's a liar, another expert says he's telling the truth. So I'm going to use the word expert really loosely, if I'm honest.
I did not know that about the body language and everything for autism, or I did not know that. You learn something new every day.
Yeah, I'm here to teach. I'm here all week.
Well,
That's why I love doing these things, because we all bring a little different perspective, don't we?
Right.
My background in that area just gives me that little bit of a different, I think. Yeah. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
I looked up that the military debunker, the guy was hired to infiltrate and drop stuff on unwilling dupes. His name was Richard Doty, D-O-T-Y.
Doty.
Yeah, he was the guy that actually put false information or crap into UFO circles just to keep people running around in circles. No pun intended.
I'll have to definitely look that up. Okay, so we'll move on to the next thing we were going to discuss, and I'll pretend like I can remember it. Right, so proved right again and again. We're supposed to be coming at this from a debunking point of view. You realise that, right? But the more I read into it, the more I was like, this is nonsense. Right, so
all of the evidence where it takes you.
Yeah, well, exactly. So there's loads of things over the years that he's been, and I will put my hand on my heart and say he could be a lucky liar, right? Because there are things like the hand scanner. And the hand scanner came out, somebody found it, I think Corbell found it, and she said, well, this is what you had, wasn't it? And he proved it in this thing that reads the length of the bone, and he says at these devices. Other people have come out and said, yeah, we had them at Area 50 for years when we were doing the stealth developments. They are useless pieces of crap, but we had them. But lots of people before that said that Bob was talking rubbish, that no such device ever existed. It wouldn't work if it did, and you're talking nonsense.
At the same time, it was featured in Radio Electronics magazine in 1973.
It's also in that
Close Encounters.
Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. It's in that as well. That was released a year before Bob's story came out. So, was he proved right again and again on that one, or did he actually just see something that stuck in his memory?
Could be. I mean, Close Encounters only shows the side. It didn't. It just didn't show a camera angle of looking down. It only showed it from a side angle.
Yeah.
Bob stated early on that how the thing worked. Biometrically measuring biological components, and then he also bitched about how much it broke down.
Yeah, which has been confirmed by other people. Yeah,
right. So he also knew how the thing worked, the theory behind it, and it wasn't a handprint scanner, because we'd all think, it's scanning your fingerprints, but no, it wasn't that. It was the bone length. And then he also knew about its maintenance schedule, which was all the time. And other people have since come forward and said, well, yeah, it was a piece of shit. So,
and I think, I mean, for me, this is where the sort of dishonest filmmaking of Jeremy Corbell strikes, in that what you're saying, Storm, is completely right. It's details like it not working properly, the maintenance schedules. Those are the things that they should have been focusing on with Bob to legitimize it. But instead, Corbell made it out to be this sort of secret mystery that nobody else had ever discussed. And as I said, going back to magazines in the early 70s and movies in the late 70s, it is something that was out there. And I think, as I said, that is the area where maybe they've made a mistake with Bob, is instead of focusing on the details that he couldn't have known that he knows, they were focusing on details that a lot of people did know about.
Yeah,
no, that's a really good point. Yeah. Stormy, I think you've got the main point there, that in the movie, and that's the big one they always talk about, is because it's in Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. All you see is a guy walk up, put his hand on a box, and then go through a door. You do not see how that device works. Bob knew how it worked. So at very least, he was in these areas. He was at Area 51. He was at S4. We should also point out that people didn't know about Area 51 before Bob. It was a little thing that people knew about in parts of Nevada, but not really much. It was
on air charts.
It was an air charts, yeah.
It was the broad, what's called a sectional. In the United States, there's you have things called MOAs, military operational areas, and S4 and Area 51. Those letters were printed on those charts, and somewhere in all of my crap, I've actually got one that has that. Or maybe you can Google those images. But yeah, it was on aeronautical charts as in the 50s ish, somewhere, I think.
What sorry, what year was it again that Bob had the first interview with Knapp? Do you remember?
89?
Yeah, because the one thing I would say, and I'm like I said, I came in here with more of a critical mind. I'm slowly having my brain massaged around Bob. But in 19
can we stream that?
No. But in 1988 there was a WGN TV special about Area 51, which had Stanton Friedman on it. So that does predate Bob's interview with Knapp. So it was about in the public consciousness. Maybe not super well known, but they were making specials about it. So
it was known about in
wanted to throw that in there
as well.
Yeah,
no, it's true,
yeah.
And it was known about in Vegas, and it had been sort of mentioned. It wasn't popularized. I think we'll talk about it. It wasn't in the housewife's consciousness. That makes sense.
Yeah.
He didn't invent it, but I completely take your point. S4 then though is relevant as well, because obviously he says that's the area where there's these hangars. Stormy, you sent me pictures that some guy had flown near everyone and took pictures, and you can't see anything. Again, though, the fact that you can't see anything at distance with a telescopic zoom isn't really a big deal for me, because I'm pretty sure they were built that way. But what do you think, Storm?
Well, Bob always described when they were built to blend in with the area. And there's lots of installations that the United States military has where they do research, and we've been doing this since World War II for the Manhattan Project, to hide from the Soviets. Or back in World War II as bombers. I mean, the places that were building out, we had factories here in America that everything, the whole city had netting over it to hide what was going on underneath to keep it away from bombers. I sent you from some photos, and I point out on the eastern shore of Papoose Lake, there's two areas that look like they may have been disturbed because they are rectangular in shape. And this is the debunkers photos. But, Bob has always insinuated, never really stated that I could find. He's always insinuated that his work, the shop he was at, was on the western side of Papoose. And there's very little photography of that. Everyone's focusing on the eastern side. I mean, in one of his interviews, I think it was the UFO conference in Rachel, Nevada in '93, where somebody asks him, well, was there anything on the other side of the lake? And he's kind of like, what do you mean? He said, well, like on the eastern side of the lake, was there any other kind of military installation there? And he says, no, there was nothing. So again, it insinuates that he was on the western side.
Yeah, it would say that. But the other important point about Area 51 is, though, that we know significant sections of it are underground. We know that from roughly how many people work there, to what we know about what structures are there, that somebody sort of did a bit of math and went, there's only about 10% of these people are working in those buildings. Where's everyone else working? And we know roughly how many people work there, because we know roughly how many aircraft fly out every day. There's people that just sit at the airport watching those, is it Jane's flights fly out? I always get that wrong. But
Well, no,
what's
yeah, I mean,
the
the population of Area 51 is a function of the transports coming in and out.
yeah. Harrison, yes, it's just theory. Maybe we are still in a secret facility. Area 51 is the way out. They got it. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I'm trying to say. If there's a significant underground base, that the thing. I mean, my colleague genuinely believes, my mate Damien genuinely believes that there are tunnels that crisscross America, and you can shoot maglev trains, and they can go hundreds and hundreds of miles an hour, and they can even go into the Atlantic, and they just move things around. And Area 51 is just one of like the train stations. I'm not personally a believer in that theory because the excavation involved would be just insane. But a lot of these people that we know, though, there's significant American bases, and they're all underground. The Germans did it in World War II. No,
I was just about to come on to this actually, because there's a lot of evidence for DUMBs, planetary wide, but even looking back to Berlin, in World War II era, the amount of secret underground tunnels and things underneath there, it was phenomenal. We did an episode on Hitler and the rat runs, and I was doing some research into it. So I mean, photography, particularly over the sort of area where S4 is meant to be, you wouldn't see anything because it's it's proposed as an predominantly underground base. So yeah. If they have the facilities in World War II, I don't see why they couldn't do it now, to a much greater scale.
All the V2s were built in massive underground factories that were just carved out of the rock. And yeah, DUMBs, these facilities. And we know that during the Cold War, the Americans built lots of these facilities because they now are all up for sale. And they built hotels in them for the survivors when they're under the world ends. And Denver Airport, I keep meaning to do a video on Denver Airport. It's such a crazy place. It's mad. But again, it's again true that there's a vast underground facility there that we don't really know what it's for. It doesn't surprise me at all that you're taking pictures of these facilities and you can't see anything, because I would argue they're designed for you not to see anything. So it means nothing for me. I'm just surprised that guy's allowed to fly even remotely close. Every time somebody gets an eye on Area 51, they buy the land that you've looked at it from. There used to be a hill, wasn't there? There used to be a hill that you could go up and look and you could see it. So they bought it.
They didn't buy it. They just seized it.
Bought it, yeah.
Eminent domain, I think is.
Yeah.
But yeah, the guy that took these latest photos, he got some guy in a Cessna 150 and flew right on the edge of the controlled airspace. And I think he actually got a visit from an F-16 that hung off his wing for a while. But they couldn't do anything to him because he was in civilian airspace. But I'm sure they would have brought him down if he had crossed that little line. But thankfully, his navigation equipment was really on point. But yeah, it's just that's something I would not do. And I can guarantee you that guy, whoever the pilot was, probably got a visit from the FAA or somebody else with a monogrammed coat.
In a black
suit. Or a black suit, right? Yeah. A sharp black suit.
I was going to say about all these guys that were planning to invade Area 51 when they were going to bend over and run at the things. And I was just like, I really wanted them to do it. For one, they'd have all died in the desert from dehydration. And I could just see them just like locking the doors. And, like just tell the Bob alien, because that's Bob from that movie, just tell the aliens to stay downstairs outside for us, will you? While these idiots run around the airport for 20 minutes. Yeah, running with their arm back. So I would have loved them to do it. And I wish, if ever they do the Area 51 sort of party they want to do every year, I'm so going. But I'm not going anywhere near Area 51 because we've all seen those videos when documentaries, they go, this is the gate, that famous gate with the posters. And within about 5 minutes, an SUV appears on that hill and guards get out because they know you're there.
I still want to go. I'm going to. I've got to go and do a video from that gate.
Yeah.
Anything you can go up to the gate, you just better not cross it. And I mean, even the YouTuber Mr. Beast, he took this whole huge crew with a camper up there. They spent the night, shot off fireworks, and it didn't bother them. But
they were watching, though. They were watching.
They were
watching on YouTube. This guy's actually given us access to his channel, so we can just watch what he's doing. Excellent. To make their job really easy, that, don't it? So, I mean, what other things has he been proved right? We've mentioned gravity. He was proved right on that. We've mentioned Air 115. He's proved right on that. This is actually something that is manufacturable, is true. The hand scanner, and so on. How about the gimbal video, though? When that first came out, even though it's been widely debunked, yeah, exactly. Again, because one of the things Bob said about the way these vehicles move, is he didn't say that they, fly. It's not like flying saucers coming in Mars attacks and the day the Earth stood still and things like this. He said they come up, they swivel. Let me just move my hands so you can see. They swivel and they move their belly towards where they're traveling.
Yeah.
That doesn't appear in sort of like science fiction and stuff. I can understand a lot of these, like sort of the fantasists, the people that actually are just talking rubbish. They get a lot of this stuff from science fiction, media, and that sort of. And they, even if they're some are quite mentally unwell, they, these things mix around in their heads, and a story comes out. I've never seen anything like the way Bob described until we saw the gimbal video. Then all of a sudden we're thinking that kind of does look like what Bob was talking about.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people discuss the is it real, is it not real of the gimbal video. And being an aircraft mechanic, I started working on airplanes in 1980 and work on avionics, and I have these degrees. That is just real military hardware. There's nothing fake about that. When you have an aircraft moving against the wind at 120 knots, that is significant. And something that can maneuver like that doesn't have to do, a turn, a gradual turn to turn into the wind. It just and goes. Well, I mean, the one thing, A, the inertia, but B is just like, we just don't have that engineering. And the other thing I want to point up, and this is not really related to Bob Lazar, but it's about the Tic Tac itself. Everyone's saying, well, if Bob Lazar was right, with the way the sports model is, all the gravity things are on one end. Why is the Tic Tac shaped like a Tic Tac? I got a really easy answer for that. It's a twin engine. There's an engine on either side. So not only can it go this way, it can just go that way. I mean, you just turn one on, turn the other off. Or one could be opening, lessening the gravity in one position, in one direction on the z-axis, and the other one is increasing gravity on the negative z-axis, and it just moves forward like that. It could be a twin engine, and to me, and then you have one on either end of the Tic Tac, and it can just go either way without having to talk about. Go ahead.
In the hangar, it says that there's lots of different UFO that we see, and lots of different shapes sometimes, and we see lots of different shapes in the skies if you believe that these are alien vehicles. So why do they all look different? Because well, look at our aircraft. All our aircraft look different. It's because they look different for different tasks. The aim is also we might have more than one species coming to us.
Even with automotive like vehicles, it could just be a design choice. There could be multiple design choices, styles.
Why not?
Yeah.
It could just be aesthetics.
They could be exactly the same as us. Yeah, that they like things that look nice. That we've had lots of designs of aircraft over the years that people don't like, but they work, but then pilots don't like them, so they don't fly them. There's a thing about the the F-117 that it's painted black because the pilots liked it. It's not very good for stealth. Black. It shows up at night. You want to be like a dark blue color, really. But they aesthetically chose they're black because the pilots were a bit nervous about this new plane, so they thought, well, paint it black and they'll like that, and they did. But the aliens aren't exactly the same.
If you want to be stealth during the day, you need to paint it some sort of grayish white. Because you're looking up, and so you want it to blend in with the upper atmosphere. And there's some airplanes, they're drones that have bright lights on the bottom. So if you're looking up, it matches the lumens of the sky and you can't see it. I mean, that's another type of stealth technology, but that's human stealth technology. It's not. Yeah. But yeah, the Concorde looks completely different than a Piper J3 Cub, but yet they both fly.
Yeah, exactly.
They're different models, different missions.
Yeah.
One of the things I read today as well, this was Bob saying this one of the bunkers, miserable sod, but he was talking about that Bob was talking about how he went out to see a UFO that actually took off, and they were talking to the pilot through a radio system, and that's not possible because of the technology that Bob was talking about. He seems to have forgotten, though, that Bob actually said he didn't think it should be possible, that if this is using an electromagnetic sort of field or some sort of gravitational field, that the radio waves shouldn't be able to penetrate that, but it did, and he couldn't explain that. The debunker just forget that Bob said that and just went with that shouldn't be possible. And my point with that would be, though, that Bob said this happened and he didn't understand it. Liars don't normally do that. They don't normally bring out a point that goes, this is something that's easily provable that I'm wrong, but it happened, so and I don't understand it. Any theory on that? That just really stuck out at me.
None. I mean, in his Rachel Nevada UFO convention Q&A, he spends most of the time saying, "Oh, I don't know." I mean, people ask him all these questions. Some are outrageous, some aren't, and he'll just say, well, "I don't know. Maybe I could see that." There's no such thing as gravitons. That's just BS. I mean, he hates gravitons, and he's right. But yeah, he spends a lot of time saying, "Well, I don't know."
The only time I've ever seen him speculate, particularly, is when he was talking to Commander Fravor, and then he was sort of, but he was obviously getting really excited about the science and the possibilities, and he wasn't really speculating, but he was sort of theorizing and like spit when they were bouncing off each other. And one of the things Fravor was talking about was the Tic Tac moved, like he's called it like a ping pong ball in a glass, and if you're like shaking it, that's how it looked like it was moving around. And then Bob was talking about time dilation, and if it's this type of technology, it might have appeared that it was doing that, but it wasn't really. And then he was actually, that's the only time I've ever really seen him
out, didn't he?
speculate. Commander Fravor, am I saying it wrong, Mike? The guy that actually it was on Joe Rogan and talking about the
David Fravor, yeah.
David Fravor.
Yeah.
So, and other than that, Bob doesn't really speculate. He talks about the things, and he'll say, this is what I saw. And I know that when I saw that 115, which I need to come back to in a second, because I forgot something about 115, I put my hand towards it when it was activated, and I couldn't touch it. And I couldn't. It was like a magnetic force on my hand, and I don't understand the science of how that's possible. If we do really quickly go back to 115, because like I said, I just forgot something. I don't want to forget it again. The video. And then we'll talk about Paul Bell. The video of the hockey puck and the smoke of the experiment.
Right. The cloud chamber test. The cloud chamber test. Yeah.
Exactly. That he filmed Golden Girls over. And one of the most important scientific videos in our history. And he taped Golden. I think it was Golden Girls.
Knapp said he videotaped Golden Girls over it. Which disturbs me that Knapp likes Golden Girls, but okay.
Well, but my issue with it, and it is the thing that I do have a problem with, is that you see nothing in that video. It shows absolutely nothing. Bob, it was been suggested that Bob still has that element 115, and it might be one of the reasons why he's actually still breathing, is because he's potentially got 115. He's been willing to show an old video. Do you think he's only been willing to release that because it really doesn't show anything? So he's like tickling the bear, but he's refusing to poke it.
Well, according to Knapp, Lazar gave him the full videotape, the whole VHS tape, and Knapp partially destroyed it. That's the thing that Knapp says. He owns up to that. I do think with something as rare, supposing that the United States government does have these craft and it does run on 115, and 115 is not a naturally occurring element on Earth, that makes what they do have beyond priceless. And if somebody illicitly got 10 grams of it out, then they would rather have him alive so he could tell him where it's at, as opposed to knock him off, I think.
It's kind of like a dead man's switch, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Really good analogy.
And I would agree with that. Yeah, I think there's basically a deal in place that it's a dead man switch is a perfect way of putting it. I've got my finger on it. If anything happens to me, it's gone, so they can't touch him. Exactly, and maybe they have tried once or twice, but and
he, you know, and according to his statements on how long these triangular machined bits last, I mean, what he has is enough to run the sports model for, he says, up to 20 to 30 years. So that's a significant thing the government would want to have back, and has, you know, and he said that, you know, he didn't, a lot of people say, well, you know, how is he going to get this out of S4? He says he didn't. And we've always known that the 115 is not machined at Area 51 or S4. It's machined at Los Alamos. And he knew the machinist, and that's how he got it out, was knowing his way around Los Alamos and his relationships with people with Los Alamos, and say, yeah, I don't know what this is, but yeah, you can have whatever the machining trimmings are, not knowing that it's.
I like the story Bob talks about as well, because I know there was they took some of this 115 out into the desert and took a plasma torch to it to try and see what, as an experiment, just before he started working there. And so the unscheduled nuclear test that went off around that period wasn't a nuclear test. It was them messing around with this 115, and it went boom. So if that's true, that's, you know, worrying to say the least. That they just thought, yeah, they've got this 115. We really don't know what it does, but it messes with gravity. Who's got a plasma torch? Let's see what happens. But I can actually see that's because I kind of how the scientific principle works, ain't it? You kind of mess with it, you know? So.
I mean, again, America. I mean, look at, I mean, it's just, I was watching this video this other night, yesterday.
Thank you, Dave.
This guy, what's his name? Whistling Diesel or whatever, buys an airplane and then, you know, disassembled, and he wants to put it back together and do donuts. Well, it's amazing he didn't kill himself. Yeah. You know, he crashed it, broke the prop, you know, you just
keep talking.
I mean, you know, at least American culture is like, hey, hold my beer. Let's see what we'll do here. I mean, that's who we are.
I mean, given Bob's penchant for blowing things up.
Yeah. Oh,
and probably the perfect place for him.
He's a firebug, man. I mean, you know, he had this illegal fireworks show, the biggest in North America, out in the desert.
He is definitely a character. You can't argue with that. And I'd love to go get drunk with him, but I do fear he might blow something up if we do. One thing about 115 before we move on to the last bit and the last few bits. One thing I've always wondered about, you know, like the secret space program, if the Americans have got this technology, why aren't they using it? And I think it might come down to the fact that it's 115. We might be able to replicate, or we've been inspired by lots of alien technology to do marvelous things like fiber optics and microelectronics and all these sorts of things that might have been inspired by alien technology. I do wonder whether it's 115 that's the problem. We can't replicate that. And it's sort of like the bit that actually generates the gravity. So without that, the rest of the technology is kind of irrelevant from a space traveling point of view. So maybe, you know, we talk about this secret space program, this technology, maybe even we might even have a few spaceships maybe that can far outstress anything NASA does. But without 115, you ain't getting any further than that. And that's why they can't admit it. That's why we've never seen this technology, is because they can't admit that. They can't go, oh, look, we've got an anti-gravity ship. Brilliant. Can you build more? No. Because we haven't got any more 115. Well, why haven't you got more 115? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do wonder why, if maybe that's the reason. Right. Next. Corbell and Knapp. I'm just going to go say that I think Jeremy Corbell's a bellend. And I might have to explain. Do you know what a bellend is, Stormer?
A bellend?
A bell
a bell end.
Bell end.
Explain it to him, Spencer.
I think when I heard bell end, I thought it was a Tolkien character I hadn't heard of. But go ahead.
No. It's he's a bit of a penis, a bit of a dick.
Gotcha. Bell end. Right. Okay, I can now visualize it. Thank you for that description.
I love Americans. Right. Anyway, so that's my personal opinion. But I think he's he's a filmmaker.
Right? Yeah.
I think he's a filmmaker, and I think he's a failed filmmaker because his films are shit. And then he's got onto a niche. He's made friends with George Knapp.
Yeah.
He's got in with Bob Lazar, and he's running with it. That is my personal opinion of Corbell. And if I watch that Bob Lazar movie one more time with Corbell walking in the desert, all the pretty lights back, and go, ooh. And the one of the comments earlier mentioned it. The pig in text messages when he was being raided. We can talk about the raid in a minute. The pig in text message. That whole scene in that movie makes me want to stick my finger in my eye and twirl it round rather than watch it. It's painful.
One of the best comments I've ever heard about that documentary was we were on a show and somebody said, they said, I watched a great documentary about Jeremy Corbell the other day. Then I got 40 minutes in and realized it was a documentary on Bob Lazar.
Right.
That is true.
He loves himself, doesn't he? He really does.
He's a filmmaker. He's a creative sort. He's not a UFO guy.
I mean, I do love the fact that he got Mickey Rourke to narrate.
Yes, yeah.
The stars, and you see yourself facing the future of humanity, banking down from the heavens.
I mean, I love that shit. I mean, it was wonderful. I mean, that was the most entertaining. He got Mickey Rourke to recite, I don't know, galactic poetry. It was awesome. But, going on, I see Knapp as a real honest to God journalist. I mean, he has journalism rewards. He's got Emmys, Peabodys, et cetera, et cetera. I kind of see Corbell as the Michael Moore of the UFO community. And I think you're right. I mean, he found his niche. Why would, as a filmmaker, why would you deviate from it? Yeah. I mean, Roger Corman found out, the money's in schlock, cheap horror films. Well, let's drive that into the ground because I got to make a house payment. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where Corbell is. I mean, he technically, in terms of filmmaking, I think he's good. I mean, he can tell a story and he can keep people interested. Mm-hmm. Is it a quality story is the question. And I like that last thing that Michael Moore did was just atrocious. The whole thing, too many humans on the planet. We got to start killing people. No. And I think that Corbell is kind of the Michael Moore of the UFO community.
I think
and Knapp is the serious guy.
Well, how Knapp came into it was different, wasn't he? Corbell sort of forced his way into it. Knapp, he came to him and he got the story and he ran with it because he's a journalist. That's what he does.
Yeah.
And like I said,
I kind of agree with what you're saying about, he's found his niche and he's running with it. That's it for me. I mean, I feel I don't necessarily think he's the most honest filmmaker. I think a lot of it with like the texting, and obviously I've already gone over about my issues with the way he presented the hand scanners and things like that. I think that I'm not saying he outright lies, but he bends for truth to create a narrative, which I don't appreciate in something that's supposed to be pulling the curtains back. I think he makes everything about himself. Which, I get it from a promotional perspective, but if you're trying to make an honest to God expose on something, don't make it about yourself because it's not about you, and don't pretend that you're trying to blow the lid over, open on everything when it's a self-promotional tool. And I think my third point on that would be, he's, he did one documentary and interviewed himself, which was, if you'll excuse the phrase, a bit wanky. And then, also he's buzzword. You watch these interviews with him and every interview he's going, I weaponized my curiosity. You need to weaponize your curiosity, weaponize curiosity, weaponize. Then he's talking about Knapp and he's going, my journalism mentor, my mentor in journalism, my journalism mentor. It's almost like he's got the same script and he just cuts it and moves it around. I don't feel that he's a very genuine guy. That's just my opinion. I might be wrong, but
Well, Spencer, going back to one of the things you were mentioning earlier about Bob being approached by Hollywood to do a story. There's one video out where he was talking about how, he was approached by Hollywood, and he said his wishes for that was it has to be 100% accurate. You can't go making crap up. And, he said he turned it down because he was worried they're going to get some guy like Steven Seagal to be in it. He said, no.
That would have been awesome.
Would it?
No.
No, Jeremy.
His hair is very black still, considering he's quite an old man.
Yeah,
Steven
yes,
Seagal. Still, no
he's
grey.
up there. Yeah.
He's looking so fat as hell. Anyway, go on. Really fat bloke.
Well, some of Napa. I mean, yeah, he's world known because of the UFO story, but his awards have. I mean, that's not his only story. I mean, most people don't know about his investigative reporting into voter fraud in Nevada, which he's won awards. I mean, he is a digger, but this is not his UFOs is not his only beat, but no one knows about everything else he does. It's just, that's a footnote.
He became a believer. That's the thing, isn't it? And he does believe in like John Lear and stuff. That he talks a lot about a lot of other things that are going on, secret moon bases and things he talks about occasionally. He has become a believer, but he wouldn't. One of his first Emmy was to do the story about the mob.
Yeah,
I believe an organized crime is a serious, serious thing.
They didn't want him to run the UFO story initially, did they? He really had to fight to push for it. I've got a lot of respect for Knapp. I just think Corbell's a dick.
Yeah,
I agree too. All right, last little bit. So I just wanted to bring all this together, and we're really talking about Bob, but it's more important, I think, what's going on right now. Bob's come back definitely into the limelight. The Joe Rogan interview, all these sorts of things, and we're all, thinking about this thing. Oh, he's been proved right. He's been proved right. He's been proved right here and here and here. I'd also love to know your opinion on what you think the Pentagon report is going to say, or if anything. But do you guys feel that at the moment it's becoming mainstream? What we're talking about? Bob's story has become mainstream. Everybody knows who Bob Lazar is. And now we've actually got the government not saying it's a weather balloon for the first time ever.
right.
USOs are apparently supercavitation torpedoes, but we'll ignore that. That's the lie for that one. Slightly more complicated than a weather balloon. I've got a video coming out on that tomorrow. Sorry, so that's why I was raising that. So a little quick plug. New video tomorrow.
Why you can.
Yeah, I've just got to finish editing the damn thing. But so, what's your general feeling about? And Stormy, you can start. What's your general feeling about the UAP Pentagon report and on all the hoopla that's going on around it?
Dude, I don't know. I mean, it's I was when I saw I guess it was last year before last, the New York Times article, with government officials, stating that yes, we are in possession of vehicles not of this earth. The morning that came out, I drove out into the Mojave Spaceport and shot my first UFO video. That's how, because previous to that, there was nothing. And here we have statements from, state senators on both sides of the aisle saying kind of the same thing. Yeah, we kind of diverted money from the U.S. Treasury for this other secret thing. And they admitted it to reporters. I mean, it's not often you get senators admitting to, laundering money into the military from other budgets. And so that's what really got me started on that my after disclosure series. And so I said, okay, let's say this is the fact. Let's just take this as this is the fact. What can we deduce from this? And where do we go from here? And that's when I started, doing the deep dive on Bob Lazar. And the thing is, we don't discuss the other things. We don't discuss how another civilization has cheated their way around to faster than light transportation. We really gloss over the fact, oh yes, there are other civilizations in the galaxy. I mean, the New York Times never even got to that point. There's not been another report on that. And I mean, just those two senators saying that, well, yeah, we are in possession of this. It's like there's a wealth of material that we just skipped over. I mean, do other planets have ferns? Do they have giraffe? Is there anything as crazy as a giraffe or a duck-billed platypus living in space? I mean, we want to know. But but the only thing you disclose it, well, we do have spaceships from other worlds. Come on, there's got to be more of that story. And so and Bob Lazar has always kind of been in parallel with that story. You know, and especially the gimbal video showing the mechanics of how this thing flies. You know, and the Tic Tac, which I believe may be, you know, a twin engine version of a, you know, just two saucers head to head, moving back and forth. What the Pentagon will say, I don't know, because they're being forced by Congress. Congress wrote a law, you know, it was a part of a bill that was signed into law. So I don't, do they feel resistive to that, and they're not going to really embellish, or are we going to get a big document dump? I mean, will there be a presidential address? I got no idea, man. We are so far in uncharted territory. Holy crap. But I mean, we just got to wait and see. It's fucking killing me, man.
It's killing me as well. Go on, Spence. What do you think about the UAP report? What are you expecting?
Well, I think, I mean, I'll be honest. I think it's going to be a damp squib. I don't know what it is. I've just been, I don't know. I just have my reservations about the whole thing. I do. I'm not Stephen Greering it right now, but you know, I don't know. I mean, it's a dice roll for me. What's going to happen? I mean, it could be explosive and mind blowing, or it could be, you know, minor insignificant things. We just don't know, do we? Ultimately, so yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath on it, but I'm excited to find out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm a little more cynical in that I genuinely believe we're already seeing the trap. And as soon as they admitted this, as soon as they said this was going to happen, I was like, we're so going to be suckered into something here. I think the trap will be that far too many people in the normal public, the general public, have started to believe in UFOs. And there has been an ongoing project for many, many years to try to stop people from taking any notice in it. It was called the Robertson Report, the Robertson Panel, after in the early 50s. They said people are far too interested in UFOs. We need to stop them. So how do we do that? The way to stop them is to make it silly, to make people think this is stupid, this is nothing, and it's silly. So the way to do that is you have a big excitement, and then you let us down, and then people get bored of it and they think it's silly. And I think that's the trap. I think that's what's coming. They're already talking about the USOs, like I said earlier, being deep cavitation technology. It was in that report last week that was, they had the leak. We've spoken to a couple of the senators. They mentioned USOs, and then they talk. The next paragraph is all about Russian and Chinese supercavitation technology. I'm not going to say any more about that because I got a video on it tomorrow, and you can see how it's a stupid thing. But to me, it's the modern weather balloon. There is no way what we were seeing, the Navy have been seeing, is supercavitation devices, submarines, whatever else.
One thing that worries me, and I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
one thing that worries me is Lou Elizondo.
Mm-hmm.
His rhetoric is always fear. Now, please don't use the Greer verb on me, but I mean it's his. Whenever he talks about one of these UFOs in American airspace, he said, they are encroaching upon. It is illegal for them. I mean, he uses these military terms to gin up fear. Mm-hmm. And the last time America got this ramp up to gin up fear was, hey, let's go to Iraq.
Yeah.
And I see the same. I mean, first they're on Fox News, then they're on CNBC, and then they start permeating into other national media platforms. And Elizondo is all about fear. This is a slight against American nationality. Our national interests are being whatever. And if there's anything I can appreciate about Greer is, well, hold on a minute. Maybe it's not about all fear. Now, I'm not saying that Greer's 100% angel or anything, but I'm really concerned about the fear message that these I mean, they bring generals on television along with Elizondo, and it's fear, 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 fear. And that's the same shit that got us into Iraq and killed 5,000 American soldiers and God knows how many other soldiers from other nations that was ginned up into following us into that stupid, stupid war.
100,000 Iraqi civilians in the first.
Oh no, the Iraqi, the civilian, they were decimated. The civilian population was decimated because fear, 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 and there was no weapons of mass destruction there. The only evidence they had was the stuff that we sold them, that I think is Reagan sold them back in the 80s.
We sold them a bit as well.
Did you? Oh, you're such a bad boy.
Personally, I don't sell many weapons of mass destruction.
Okay.
But, you know, my government, silly sausages, and a few delivery systems occasionally. But they had loads of money, and he was quite nice at first.
Well, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did what, you know, Western civilization wanted him to do. Pump that oil, man. Pump it. And if he hadn't gone into Kuwait, he'd probably still be pumping.
Oh, most definitely. We couldn't be bothered. You Yankees stopped us. I found out the British wanted to invade Iraq after the first Kuwait war, and you guys stopped us. George Bush Senior went, no, I want the troops home by Christmas, so we weren't allowed. Damn America! We wanted to. We were in a. When we started a fight, we
ruin everything.
Yeah, we wanted to finish it. Damn it! But so. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be anything in this UAP report. But to be honest, I think they're in a really difficult position. There's a proper you know, frying pan and fire situation for the Americans, for the Pentagon on this. I do think they were tricked into doing it because basically this law was slipped into the COVID bill, and I don't think anyone sort of twigged until it was sort of enacted, and then everyone went, the Pentagon's got to go, we've got to do what? How did that happen? But now they've got to do something. But there is the whole weather balloon thing. They've got to tell us just enough that the general population don't go, well, that's a fucking lie. So what's really going on? But they can't tell us the truth because, well, they've never done that before. It would freak them out. I still can't believe when the Tic Tac video was released, they released it, or somebody leaked it, and then the Pentagon went, yeah, that's real.
That was astonishing, man. It's like, what?
I just don't think there must have been somebody on a break that normally is in charge of the lies.
Right.
And it was sort of like, what did the apprentice just say? That it's real? Oh, dear God, get him off. Who let him speak? Sort of thing. You know, or the CIA were having an off day that day or something, and they just didn't realize. You know, it's just like, we've never seen that before. When these 3 videos were released, when the Omaha video was released, and the Pentagon have gone, it's real. That's never happened before, ever.
Here's my cynical side's popping up here.
Who?
So we've been talking about, you know, the money part of this, you know, the how hard it is, you know, how expensive it'd be, you know, to build these spaceships, especially if you have very little material. You know, what if this is, and this is another classic American move, is we gin up all this fear. We have 2 senators, both sides of the aisle. So it won't be a politically polarizing issue like surgical masks have been. And they said, well, you know, we need more money. We need $1 trillion to figure out what these UFOs are. I mean, you know, once you gin up enough fear, oh yeah, shit, I need to be, you know, scared about this. So let's gin up the public, and then we can legitimately drop $1 trillion into this program. I mean, it could be just, you know, PR, timed PR to get trillions of dollars out of American taxpayers to go fund to develop 115 as a stable isotope. We've Americans have done this over and over and over, you know, especially when it comes to the military industrial complex. They get everything they want, they get it. But the formula is they have to figure out how to pitch it to the American people first. And one thing we learned with the Iraq War is use fear, and even if it turns out nothing happened, there won't be any real blowback.
I think the American, particularly the way the system is, and particularly with the industrial military complex is, and the American economy needs a bad guy. It's the Nazis, then the Russians, then the terrorists, and then something. it always needs a bad guy because so much of its economy is based around conflict and destabilization, and and
banana republics.
And banana republics, yeah. Somebody says to me about how that it's a nonsense that the Americans would ever fake an alien invasion, and obviously that's what Greer generally believes, that there's a fake alien invasion coming. And I don't generally believe that's happening, but what I do believe is the Americans would do it if they could. And I'm not just telling me as well that whoever really is in charge of the American industrial military complex isn't going, well, that would be the war to end all wars. Great. And you think we're the world police now? Let's have a fake UFO invasion, destroy as much of the world's military system as we can, and then we'll step in and save the day, a la Independence Day. In theory, they could take over. Is that a plan that I think is genuine?
It's Watchmen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is Watchmen. You know, look at how we got into the Korean War, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. That was a total lie. And how long that conflict's still going on because there's a North Korea and South Korea. You should do a video on that, man. I mean, that was a total disgrace of something that America did and kind of never apologized.
We did a video on it. We did a red flag video.
I'm so sorry. I'm not. I feel ashamed now.
When we did 9/11, we started off with what is a red flag in a situation. One of these was the one that the Vietnam as well. The
we have a history of making up shit so we can go attack it.
We pretend, or the Americans pretended one of their ships had been attacked by a Vietnamese gunboat, and several people had died. None of it was true. And then they invaded Vietnam.
I mean, you look back as well, and you've got things like Operation Northwoods, which was a proposed false flag attack on American soil to engage in a war with Cuba that JFK shot down. You know, it's on record. They've been proposing stuff like this for hundreds of years. You know,
Northwoods was approved by the chiefs, by the military chiefs. I forget what they're called. Where's the head of the Navy, head of the thing? The Joint Chiefs.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff.
It was approved. And then JFK saw it and went, we're not doing that. They were going to fake a terror attack on American soil. They were going to fake, one of the ideas was to take a cruise ship. We'll put SEALs on board. We'll capture the cruise ship full of Americans, take it into Cuban waters and sink it. And then we'll blame the Cubans. We'll be allowed to invade. And they released this as part of a Freedom of Information Act release.
Yeah.
And then everybody went, whoa, what are we going to do? And the Americans went, well, we didn't do it. Like that made it okay. But you thought about it. Because you planned it. You actually picked which buildings would be best to take down. It's like, you know, it's just crazy. And that's,
you know, it'd be kind of easy for the government to fake an alien attack. You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be UFOs over New York City. I mean, like right now we have all of the interaction between UFOs and humans that we're showing evidence of is the Navy. Sink a carrier, sink a frigate in the middle of the Pacific with no witnesses and just show this video. Oh, here's the attack coming. Now we're at war with aliens. And then it all comes out. And it's, you know, Gulf of Tonkin all over again. I mean, it's, and so that way you have your alien attack on a U.S. Navy vessel in international waters where there's no one else around. They can't film it from the beach or anything. You know, you just sink the ship.
Most definitely. Yeah, it could be done very, very simply.
Very, very simple.
And I hope that's not where we're going, but hey, it's a movie I'd watch. Let's be honest.
It's a movie.
I'd be interested. And you know what as well? The really bad thing is it would completely work. Because people would freak out.
People would freak out.
And then they're like, I have children, so I am completely illogical when it comes to protecting my children. I worry about things that are completely illogical and that are not really a threat because I'm terrified something might happen to my children. So if they say to me, you're a threat, I'm not really thinking about me. I'm thinking my kids are a threat. And I'll do and say whatever you want me to do to protect my children. And that's how most people think.
Yeah. And most people have kids.
Yeah, exactly. So just to conclude then on Bob Lazar, because you remember that's what we were actually talking about
Bob
a little while ago.
Massive tributary there. Brilliant.
Yeah. We always go off. We always wander off. But hey, it's my channel. I can talk about what the hell I want to talk about. We'll talk about England game last night if you want for a bit. It was
no,
you got care
please
storming,
don't.
but it's
Please don't.
Stupid England. Anyway, we're not very good.
Boring
I
game.
want to do. I said repeatedly last night. I want to do what the Americans do with baseball. I want to have a World Cup for football because we invented the game, but don't invite anyone else. We're the only ones that go. Right? So other people will go, can we come? No. We're playing it. We're world champions again. Yay! Something like that. Anyway. So conclusions. Does reading all the debunking stuff really change your opinion on Bob? Because me and you have spoken about this a couple of times, I think, with Spencer, that I kind of swing a little bit on Bob sometimes. Sometimes I believe him and my wholeheartedly guess, like, why would he make this crap up? And I see some of the attacks he has to deal with, and I think, God. But then other times I think, there's parts of this story that don't make bloody sense. That don't seem to be true. When you've read all the debunking stuff preparing for this video, has any of that sort of like changed your opinion at all?
The debunking stuff that you and I have discussed previously and that I read, it's just it kind of puts me in back more solidly on Bob's side for no other reason is the debunking is so bad. I mean, it's so low quality, I mean, going back to the Stan Meyer, I mean, not the Stan Meyer, the Myers photos is like, that's all you got? That's it? Well, what about these other cases where the saucer-shaped UFOs have been seen? I mean, if the debunking was better, and then the flip side of that is the reason the debunking sucks so bad is because it's very difficult to debunk scientifically or logically. Bob Lazar. Maybe that's my problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, if the debunking was better, I might be a little bit against Bob Lazar, but it sucks so bad. It kind of, okay, Bob.
Yeah.
Team Bob.
I mean, I was very Team Bob, and then we did an episode on it, and I read a load of stuff, and I went into the episode, and afterwards I said at the end, I don't really believe him. I don't believe him. I don't know what he's talking about. Then I've gone back to it today, done a load more research, reiterated the points, and I was sat there, just getting my notes together beforehand, and I'm like, damn it, I believe Bob again. And I'm just, every time I keep swinging back and forth. But right. Yeah, I'm having a good Bob day today. So, yeah.
Well, it's always good to, stay alert, and always challenge your...
Yeah.
It's always challenge your belief. Is part of the problem with the Bob story, though, is that a lot of it is he hasn't really got physical evidence. We have to believe his word almost. So it's sort of like it requires a bit of faith. Is that fair?
I mean, yeah, you definitely have to buy into his testimony. You have to have a certain level of faith on that. Because if you don't, it's just, words coming out of his mouth. Yeah, it's just words. But again, if he is just, he's just this lucky guy that guesses, good God, is he lucky? I mean, what was it? It was the intermediate vector boson. Screw that shit. Okay. I mean, right off the cuff, and gravitons are BS. And this was in '93, before I think the first concrete was ever poured at CERN.
And he spent a lot of time in Vegas, and I want to go there with him because he's a lucky son of a bitch. And the things they attack him for, though, like, we actually didn't mention the brothel a great deal. They attack him for this thing with this brothel a lot, that he was involved and he was actually arrested. The thing, and they always say that attacks his credibility because it says a lot about his personality. One of the things it says about his personality is, though, when he was in front of a judge being threatened with prison for a crime, that's very rarely ends up going to court in Vegas. Prostitutes in Vegas are kind of, like, quite popular.
Oh, you get handouts. I don't know if you've ever been to Vegas, but yeah, you'll be just walking down the street and you'll get somebody like handing out like flyers for hookers.
Oh, I've been to Vegas. I was walking down the street and a guy was at the side of the road saying, Coca-Cola, bottled water, cocaine. Coca-Cola, bottled water, cocaine.
Welcome to America.
Like, what's the last one you just said? What was the last? But yeah, I was talking to a prostitute. She was lovely. We chatted for about half an hour. And then I had to point out I was married. And she was just like, well, it's been lovely speaking to you. I love your accents, boys.
I take PayPal.
Yeah.
You're married.
Yeah, exactly,
okay, I'll charge you a little bit less. There's a discount.
Exactly. Oh, if only. I might have been tempted then. But I divorced my wife since then. I should have just gone for it. But anyway. But yeah, I mean, prostitution is kind of thing. So yeah, it never ends up in court, but he's there in front of a judge being threatened with prison. And they basically said, you know, what is your education history? And he said, I have degrees from Caltech and MIT. And they went, well, we can't verify that. If you don't tell us the truth, you're going to prison. And he doesn't look like the sort of guy that would do well in prison. I think he'd be someone's friend, if you know what I mean. You know? And he stuck with it. Even the debunkers I've read today said, well, he's got balls of steel. Well, maybe he's telling the truth, Bellend.
The judge even bitched about how difficult it was to find out anything on him.
Exactly.
You know, but the judge did, you know, he did accept his W-2 from the Office of Naval Intelligence as a real thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, if Bob is lying, I don't think he's a fantasist. I think he could be mentally unwell. It's possible he's a lucky liar. It is possible. And to be honest, even the most hardened believer has got to say, well, look, it's possible.
Oh, yeah.
But do I think he's a liar? Not personally. I actually have a bit of faith in him. And I do. I kind of believe Bob. I still believe Bob. And you know, the main reason why, it is exactly what you said, Stormy. The first thing I ever look at when I'm looking at a new conspiracy or something else is I look what the debunkers are saying. Mm-hmm. And if the debunkers' argument is weak, then I think, well, there's got to be something to this.
Right. That's good. Yeah.
Did the same thing with 9/11, Building 7 and all that nonsense. I looked at the debunkers and I'm like, oh, well, that's bullshit. So anyway, thank you. And Mike B, yes, you should subscribe again. You can subscribe to your own channel. You just got to create a few like fake accounts and just create, just subscribe. So just do that. It's been amazing talking to you guys. Spence, I always love it. I will always have a chat with you. I will speak to you anytime. And Stormy, you've been a legend. Thank you so much.
You liar. I'm not a legend. But thank you so much for having me on. I know we have been chatting about we got to get together and we got to do a video for almost a year now. Yeah, I mean, it's been a while, and I guess I'm just such a princess. It just had to be the right time. But yeah,
it's all about you, Stormy. You know, so you're in the middle. You know, so you're in the middle on the thing.
It's a Stormy sandwich.
It's my channel. I should be the meat.
Right.
The sandwich, not you.
But in all sincerity, thank you so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
We've loved having you on. Thank you so much. And guys, please like and subscribe to Sciworx and to Aliens and Stuff if you haven't already, because they've got some great content on there. It's not as good as mine, but it's nearly as good. So
we try our best. We're in the shadow of greatness.
Exactly. Thanks, guys, and I will see you again very soon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.